Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our second quarter appraisal webinar, Defending Your Appraisal, What to Do if a State or Federal Agency has questions. Also, I am going to include some notes about if by any chance you got sued. So kind of defending your appraisal and what to do. My name is Sally Carruthers. I'm President and CEO of True Union. Just a few housekeeping items. Everybody on the call, on the webinar is mute except me. At the end of the webinar, my email address will be there. And if you have any questions or comments, please get hold of me. I would love to hear them. Also, this is being recorded, so if you want to go back to it or have any of your colleagues watch it, listen to it, it'll be up on our webpage in a little while. Also, finally, we're going to talk about some legal stuff, and I just want to caveat it. I'm an appraiser. I am not an attorney. So any kind of things that I present are what I learned from other people, including attorneys, and I probably will reference them as we go on. So, one final thing. Usually this webinar runs from about 45 minutes to an hour, so we try not to take up much of your time. Okay, so the objectives of this webinar are several. To understand potential liability issues and risk, to be aware of the issue of appraisal bias. That's a big topic right now and a very necessary topic that appraisers should be thinking about and addressing. Be aware of the potential issues of boilerplate language and in particular responses, either to revision requests, to reconsiderations of value. We're going to learn how to respond professionally to a reconsideration of value. As we learn, many either state complaints or complaints of bias or anything else often originate from a reconsideration of value. It's a value issue. And so we do need to be able to address those professionally and meaningfully and accurately and without bias. Learn how to provide a professional, meaningful rebuttal to serious questions on your appraisal report. And that really is avoiding that boilerplate language and addressing exactly what somebody is asking. And then we're going to talk about mitigating risks so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you have to defend your appraisal. So I'm going to talk a little about different aspects before we get into each item. So when we talk about a state complaint, who files those? Often, well, first I'm just going to say, sometimes that is an anonymous filing, and so you might never know, or you might not learn until you are actually talking to a state investigator. Often it's a homeowner, typically it's a value issue. But realtors file state complaints, lenders often file state complaints, and so do AMCs. We're actually required to. We actually have mandatory reporting. If there is a severe appraisal issue, something that we see, we actually have to are supposed to file a complaint with the state agency. So don't beat up on us if we do. It has to be it has to be pretty bad for us to do it. And we will, and I think like any lender, will make any attempt, all attempts to get the appraisal fixed. So it's only when we really feel that it is beyond that either the appraiser doesn't clearly understand how to fix it, or they haven't responded, and we have a deficient appraisal report that has USPAT violations. That is when we will actually file a complaint. Having said that, I think I only have right now a couple out there that we have filed that are going through the process. So it's not a common thing. Secondary market participants may do that, Fannie, Freddie. Other appraisers, as reviewers, they may get hold of one of your appraisal reports and find it deficient. So, and there are other parties that will file a complaint with the state. I want to talk about secondary market buybacks. That's when Fannie Mae wants to buy back a mortgage from a lender based on a bad appraisal. It is an appraisal issue, and they will force the lender to buy back that mortgage. The lender has originally sold that mortgage to Fannie Mae, and Fannie Mae does an audit, or Freddie Mac, and realizes there is a problem with the appraisal. Before they do that, they are going to come to you and try and fix it. In all cases where we have any kind of deficient appraisal, whoever has that usually tries to get it fixed. So most often there is some kind of red flag that shows that appraisal is high risk. Typically, most buybacks I have seen have a high risk score, and I mean a 5. So there's a SSR risk score between 1 and 5, and usually it's a 5. Usually the majority of comparables do not support the value. You might have one, you might have hung your head on one, but the rest of them just don't, even though they look to be similar to the subject property. Often there are cases where the appraiser has vacated the immediate neighborhood for sales, or there may be a lack of consistency. You have used the same comp several times over, but decide to change the condition rating when it should be the same, something like that. And maybe it's because your data differs significantly from your peers. Maybe it's a gross living area. Maybe you've put a stable market and other appraisers have put something else, or whatever it is, that it's significantly different from your peers. And also, or you may have unsupported adjustments or lack of adjustments. You have your subject property is 50 years old, but you use comparables that are 10 years old and you don't make an adjustment. Why is that? Why have you not done that? So secondary, this has happened. I think we can expect to see this happen a lot. It was kind of not very common during the COVID times, but we're seeing a few more of these beginning to appear. A lawsuit. Nobody wants a lawsuit, but it happens. So, we're talking about state agencies, we're looking about secondary, Fannie and Freddie asking for explanations on the appraisal, or you may have somebody that files a lawsuit against you. We tell everybody immediately, you get a lawsuit, call first of all, before I even say anything, anybody can sue anybody. So just realize that is a possibility. Call your E&O company, make sure that they know about it. These are usually value-based. But many of them have other reasons, such as measurements, condition and quality issues, and often they do pop up around new construction. We're going to talk a little about negligence and duty owned. Most lawsuits against appraisers are about professional. They accuse the appraiser of professional negligence. And in order for a person to be able to prove professional negligence, it has to be shown that the appraiser had a duty owed to the plaintiff. What does that mean? In simple language, it means that the plaintiff was the intended user or client of the appraisal report. And we do know that in often cases that if it is a homeowner or borrower who is filing that lawsuit, you are actually doing the appraisal for mortgage purposes, for a bank or credit union, and that you do not or may not owe a duty to the borrower. A lot of more common now, I shouldn't say a lot, but more common now, we are seeing lawsuits based on racial discrimination. This has kind of got some news, and I think that it is really, and sometimes there is validity in it, but obviously we're going to talk about how to defend yourself and how to prevent these type of lawsuits. Going back to this duty owed, watch for contract language in a contract that states a borrower may rely on your appraisal, and maybe have some kind of defense to that in your appraisal. We're going to talk about that. Essentially, an appraisal waiver, that someone is relying on your appraisal to help them essentially determine a purchase price. That can be a real issue. So, elements of professional liability. As I said, this is there has to be the existence of a legal duty of care owed to the plaintiff. And basically, breach of that duty, e.g., providing an inflated valuation or failing to provide a USPAC compliant appraisal, is grounds for a suit and damages resulting from that breach of duty. So be aware of that duty of care owed. It's very important. So our 1004s that most of you are doing appraisals on are kind of ambiguous on this. So we have some pretty narrow intended use and intended user language in there. The intended use of this appraisal report is for the lender client to evaluate the property that is the subject of this appraisal for a mortgage finance transaction. And then the intended user of this appraisal report is the lender client. However, we have that wonderful section, certification number 23, and it says the borrower, another lender at the request of the borrower, the mortgagee, or its successors, and assigns mortgage insurers, government-sponsored enterprises, and other secondary market participants may rely on this appraisal report as part of any mortgage finance transaction that involves any one of the other parties. Yeah, that's not a good one, is it? Except it does say as part of a mortgage finance transaction. Not that I know how wide that would be. So so we do recommend that you kind of get some suggested language, some to kind of defend yourself in it. This comes from Christensen Law Firm. Pete Christensen is an attorney that specializes in appraisal liability. And I think this really, and he has run this by Fannie and Freddie, they are fine with it. So I'm going to leave it up on the screen for a little while, for a few seconds, for you to be able to take a screenshot of it and boringly read it to you. The appraiser has not identified any purchaser, borrower, or seller as an intended user of this appraisal, and no such party should use this appraisal for any purpose. Such parties are advised to obtain an appraisal from an appraiser of their own choosing if they require an appraisal for their own use. Any reference to or use of this appraisal report by a purchaser, borrower, or seller for their own purposes, including without limitation for the purposes of a property purchase decision or an appraisal contingency in a purchase agreement, is at such party's own risk and is not intended or authorized by the appraiser. So that really addresses that issue there with the purchase agreement. If there is an appraisal contingency in there, so take a screenshot of this or use something similar. You don't have to use this, but I think it's a very, very good thing to do. If you don't get this, just email me and I will send it to you. So appraisal bias, this is a big hot topic, and at the moment it's going hand in hand with eyes being on the appraisal profession and really the lack of diversity in the appraisal profession. We all know that the 98% of appraisers are white, and so many of them are men, and this type of thing. And there have been a lot of examples in the press, on TV, of appraisal bias. And now there is legal action. So Right now, we are seeing kind of 4 areas, 4 homes for these types of complaints. A complaint that goes to HUD, the Office of Fair Housing, a complaint that goes to the state agency, and it can take the form of legal action, a suit, or that it could go to the CFPB. So you might find, hopefully you don't, but that's where you would, one of those 4 right now that you get the complaint from. So mitigating risk of appraisal bias, I would say to all of you right now, go and take a fair housing class. It is great defense. You'll learn something. And there's nothing wrong with saying, being, kind of preemptive on this and saying, okay, I did take a fair housing class and this is what I learned. And they are available on, online to take. I think it's a good idea. Your new 7A use plan includes quite a lot of fair housing stuff in it too. So I think that will really help. Provide credible, professional, accurate appraisal products. Deficient work provides grounds for defense. If you're providing a credible, professional, accurate product, hopefully there is no deficiency there that becomes the way that somebody can actually provide a complaint against you. And of course, I mean this without bias too. Be very careful to avoid language, obviously, that could be pressing. Be careful how you define your neighborhoods. But I think if you're providing these credible professional work, I'm not saying, that you increase the values or decrease the values or anything. You're providing credible, professional, supported appraisal reports. Often these kind of fair housing appraisal bias questions start with a reconsideration of value. Somebody has started with that. They think the value is low, so they fill out a reconsideration of value. So provide a professional and considerate response. We're going to talk a little about this, but this simply, and I see it all the time, the kind of value stance, no response stance, or even a rude response, it's just not going to cut it. You're going to get a very negative, you're going to get into some kind of fight with a borrower on that, and that can never be a good idea. So, make sure that you do respond to a reconsideration. Make sure it's not, well, the value stands. You can still say your value is supported, the additional information provided, and go into detail on that information and say, this is why I didn't use it. This is, why this works better, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a really important thing, not to offend somebody right off the bat by refusing to or taking a very hard stance on your reconsideration of value. So when you receive one, I know these are, I think it's probably the most annoying things that you get. I mean, I think it's worse than underwriting revisions and even things from us. I know I talk to a lot of people about these reconsiderations of value. They're annoying, and we do our best to filter through them. We try and avoid you getting multiple reconsiderations from a borrower, because we kind of feel that is a that means that they're trying to intimidate you or badger you. We try and go back to the client, but they're kind of in the middle of this too. So I think that certainly address the second one. Hopefully you won't get the first one, sorry, hopefully you won't get a second one. So when you do read one of these, I always advise read it very carefully and with consideration. Somebody has taken some time to prepare this document. I know it's frustrating. They just put down 3 sales, or they just sent you a CMA or something like that. And again, we try to kind of prevent you getting that. But I think you have to read exactly what they say and understand they've taken time to do this and they want a response. Most importantly, remain impartial and remove any emotion from your analysis or reading it, and most importantly, your communication back. I've seen, if this basically ignorant borrower would understand, this is, addressed in page 5 of the report, that's not going to get anywhere. We understand that whoever provided this reconsideration of value does not have your expertise. They're not appraisers. They're not being paid for their opinion of value. The person who fills that out does have bias. Yes, they either are the homeowner or they're an agent. So we understand that. We understand it may be amateurish. They may include sales from far away or whatever it is. But, going down to their level never, ever helped anybody on this. So I think that being professional in your response is very important. The other thing to remember is your response becomes a permanent part of your work file. So if you do decide to be sarcastic and rude in your response, and I have seen sarcastic and rude in a response, that's your final file. That's going to be reflected in that's your work, your body of work. And I'm sure you don't want to have that. So avoid any of those kind of potentially offensive comments. I would make sure that you put your the rebuttal to the reconsideration in a, in somewhere an obvious part of your appraisal report, and clearly label it. Right, clearly, professionally, and accurately address any data provided. And as I said, don't be offended by it being amateurish, inaccurate, biased, out of date, whatever it is. And if necessary, just provide additional, details to support your findings. Which could be additional photos. You might show an interior photo of one of the comps that you use versus one of the comps that they have provided to say, hey, look at the difference in condition. I know it takes time, but it's going to save you an awful lot of hassle later on. You may just hit the wrong borrower or the wrong agent who's just going to take this all the way. So spending the time when you get this reconsideration, what's better. And the other thing is just be prepared to admit you're wrong. Sometimes it happens. You did miss a sale. I don't know, for some reason it wasn't reported immediately in the MLS or whatever it is. You may be wrong. And I think there's nothing wrong with admitting that you are and amending your report and going on. It happens in every profession. It happens all the time. I don't realize this. I just filed an amended tax report reform from 3 years ago. My account, I'd had it done by someone else. My accountant looked at it and said, Sally, this is wrong. The IRS owes you money, which is one reason to do it. So yeah, it happens. You have to amend reports. That sometimes you're wrong. It's the way of life. We're not all perfect. We aren't perfect human beings. There is an amazing risk of boilerplate language, and this is an example. I hope whoever did it is not on here, but it's just this is all boilerplate, and it's supposed to address every single scenario, every single one, and it doesn't. It's not the same, and you can't cover everything with a page of boilerplate. It's beautifully written, but it just doesn't cover everything, and it's just nonsense in a lot of ways. And this whole thing of how the comparable sales search, you search a different way every time. I would have thought you did. There are reasons that you may use a sale that's over 90 days. And there isn't one reason that covers everything. Markets are different. And in some markets, you need to explain why homes aren't selling, and that you had to use dated sales. boilerplate language does not address that. You can't have one single paragraph that covers every single issue of highest and best use. That just doesn't work. So I recently actually yesterday, we had a situation where we had the client came to me and said, I think the appraiser, there's some issues with the appraiser. The appraiser has actually previously appraised this property that used a different square foot. And I'm like, really? Well, I don't know about that. And I looked through the appraisal report. He had no prior disclosure of the prior assignment. And that's really simply because he had just boilerplate language all the way through it. And now he's got a pretty major use pact violation, and just simply from putting his boilerplate language in there. So this is an example of what a Fannie Mae complaint looks like. This is on a property that they were seeking a buyback on. They'd audited the file, but they gave about, I think, 3 chances for the appraiser to really kind of come back. So like a lot of these, it was a waterfront property. And often you will see that some of the kind of different properties are often the ones that have higher risk. They're just difficult to appraise. They don't work inside that Fannie Mae model. But as you kind of dug down into it, there were some real issues. You know, one of them was that comp number 2 basically didn't support the value, and it was in a similar location on the lake. Comp number 1 that was used was not lakefront; it was acreage property, and actually it was that one that was used really to give. It was given most weight in the appraisal. The other thing is that the subject property was 31 years old, and the comps, 2 of the comps were like 15, 16 years old, and there was no adjustment and for age. So, they were kind of coming back on that. And, bottom line is they did not think the value was supported. So when we first went to the appraiser and we kind of sent that, we kind of said, look, this is pretty serious. This is Fannie Mae saying it. I kind of got this really generic kind of comment, like comp number 1 is on acreage, however, given most weight as it's similar in view, design, blah, blah, blah. It was just generic. There was nothing really there. Nobody really said anything in this response. So we kind of coached and talked to the appraiser and finally ended up with this, which was a much more detailed response and was finally accepted by Fannie Mae. So it kind of went into why comp number 1 was most similar, talked about the room layout, talked about acreage and how that land was worth the same as the subject's waterfront lot, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that did come up was when on the age, unfortunately, the appraiser initially came back and said, well, the effective age was the same. And they kind of came back and said, well, we respectfully disagree. That age is age, and you adjust on the actual chronological age of the property and not on the effective age. The effective age would be reflected in the condition. So in the end, they actually produced a pretty detailed response, and that's what we would expect. A lot of it is explaining the why. Why did you use something? Why did you do what you do? In the canned report, I think that canned comments, there's something about adjustments were based on paired sales. Well, I'll tell you this. Fannie Mae will challenge you on that. They'll come back and say, show us your paired sales. And I hope you can do that. And we have had that happen, and it's got to go getting the old kind of things out and really trying to prove what those adjustments are based on paired sales. So yeah, these guys at Fannie and Freddie are pretty smart. They know what they're talking about. They pull the wool over their eyes. So that was the final response. So when you get one of these, if you ever get one, hopefully you never will, a potential secondary market buyback. hopefully you're told. I really hope that, I know you will be told by us. If it comes out of our company, you will be told it is a potential buyback. This is very serious. You need to take care of this. And so really make sure that you understand the request and you obey the time requirement. Don't just pop it under and that's the same with any of these complaints I'm going to talk about, whether it's a lawsuit, it's a state complaint. Really understand there is a time frame. You have to obey that time frame. Don't just bury your head and not look at it. Also, understand the gravity of the issue. Yeah, lenders do not like getting buybacks based on their appraisals. They really don't, especially in this day and age where loan amounts are more. So take it very seriously. Understand that, hopefully it isn't career ending or whatever, but you just never know. But don't panic. I just said take it seriously, but don't panic. I don't mean freeze so that you don't do anything. One thing I really think you should do is reach out to the AMC Chief Appraiser or an appraiser mentor. They will help you as much as they can. They have more experience in dealing with this. I will gladly help anyone if it happens under my watch, and I've dealt with it and have helped people. And I think the other chief appraisers, I know other AMCs would gladly help you through this and provide some guidance for you. And even to the point that if you provided a rebuttal, they would look at it, review it, give you some comments, and really assist you through it. But again, if you have a mentor or someone that you feel confident to help you, use them. Read each request very carefully. And when you provide your rebuttal, make sure that you address each request and you provide a meaningful, detailed response. And that means that, like I showed you in that one before, you're saying, if they say, why is this comp given most weight? You explain exactly how it provides an alternate purchase, a purchase alternate to the subject property. So it's meaningful. It's not just do not just put in those canned comments. It won't work. Include as much data and support as necessary. Interior photos, anything else. One thing I've noticed on the lakefront properties that I've done for this, for some reason, often the value I think may be right, but the appraiser's gone about some of the wrong way of doing it. And often the value of a property is based on its location on the lake, right? Is it on a big expanse of the lake? Can you get a deep dock in there? That kind of things to have access to, whatever. And if you need to go out there and get more pictures, get on a boat and take some pictures, whatever you need to do, provide it for this. And make sure that it's grammatically correct and free of typos. Nothing makes you look more, I'm sure there were typos in this, but makes you look more of a non-professional than that kind of thing. There are kind of guidelines that you might get as you're kind of providing an appraisal and some risks. Usually buybacks happen in more unusual properties, kind of large homes, small homes, lakefront properties, acreage properties, and really because they're kind of atypical properties, and they don't kind of fit in the mold, and so they kind of throw off the model, the data model, and so you often have to provide more details on them. Support your value indicators. Determine what they are and support them. If it is lake frontage, price per front foot on the lake, for example, determine what that is and show how you're supporting it. If it's size, do the same. At the initial submission of your appraisal report, even before any buyback or anything, if you are given SSR risk indicators, address them and you'll get some kind of idea that there may be an issue. Another indicator is that they give you alternate sales. And again, lakefront property and it's located on a specific area of the lake, they're going to provide alternate sales that may not be comparable, for example. Make sure that you maintain that consistency of assignments. You're using the same company, give it the same condition and quality rating, the same size, the same lot size. Verify your data and make sure it is accurate. And support any adjustments. And don't just say you do. Make sure you do have support for your adjustments. And most importantly, I think, avoid that boilerplate language. Just make straightforward explanations. They work far better. A straightforward, meaningful explanation as to why you did what makes much more sense. So, for example, you use dated sales. Why did you use dated sales, and why was it necessary? Why were there no more recent sales? I mean, especially if you have plunked down, you were still using the market conditions, whatever it was, and you plunked down 3 sales in the last 3 months, but then you use dated sales. You really need to explain why. So maybe, and remember, a why will create another why. So it may be that there were no sales of this type of property in the last 90 days. Well, then you've got to explain why there were no sales of this type of property in the last 90 days. Was that because it was an over improvement? Or was it because it was an unusual property? And is that impacting marketability? So, the why really is important. State complaints. Let's kind of do a little kind of deep dive into those. The most common type of state complaints is for value. I think the second one is measurements. I'm hoping that the whole ANSI thing is really going to help with that. That we'll stop having all the complaints about my house being measured improperly. And of course, mostly from the realtors. Oh, it's 200 square foot off, and all they do is then they say, well, it's sold at $200 a square foot, so 200 times 200 is 40,000. So yeah, they're off 40,000 on that isn't right. We all know it doesn't work like that. So, but we see that a lot. That's immediately what they think. They think that if it's 200, square foot off, and you times that by the price per square foot, then that's how far the appraisal is off. They don't realize that the square foot only provides in the way that we do appraisals, because we divide it in elements. The square foot only means so much. A state, when they get a complaint, they'll look at the report and they'll investigate for obvious use pact compliance. Again, if you receive a complaint, the first call should be your E&O company. Let me tell you why. They are not going to necessarily, kind of push up your premiums because you have a state complaint. I did a recent seminar, and Peter Christensen, that I referred to before, was presenting, and he's told the story about an appraiser who had some kind of issue with their appraisal report. Somebody filed a state complaint against them. The state kind of came back with findings on the appraisal report. They were given, like a slap on the wrist, fine, and told to take a class. And then the borough was still upset, so they filed a lawsuit against them. Well, at that point, he calls his E&O company. Well, it turns out he had not told his E&O company about the little issue with the state. And so because of that, they canceled insurance. So he was out on that. So make sure you do. Get some legal advice. You're going to need it. And make sure that your work file is on order, because you will have to present your work file. Repercussions of state disciplinary action can be pretty severe. And it can be a fine, some education, possibly suspension. The worst one is revocation. Usually that's kind of on an issue of moral turpitude. You've done something, you committed a felony or something like that. But it can result in removal from lender lists or AMC lists. And here's the thing, it cannot be expunged. It's there all the time. So pretty important to get some help if you do have a disciplinary action. The good thing is that now most of the states kind of talk to each other, and we also have information coming down from the appraisal subcommittee, so there tends to be kind of equality on the kind of disciplinary action being taken by states. It's not just one state being the wild, wild west and just being really hard on an appraiser, on appraisers, and another state not doing anything. Now we have some consistency from states to states. One thing, if you do have a state complaint, be honest about it. Be honest about it, as I said, with your E&O company. If you're asked about it by an AMC or lender, let them know, because you're going to get in more trouble if we find out. We get it, that it happens, and that's not going to be an issue. We'll review it. But if you have one and you don't tell us, and then we find issues with your appraisal report, if we report that to the state, we will report that you lied on your application, which isn't good. So be honest. The same with this, with the investigator at the state. Tell the truth. Let them know. I don't know. I heard of one lady who went one time because somebody else had been inspecting for her, and she was signing that she had inspected, and she insisted that no, she had inspected the property, and I guess they called the homeowner and just pointed out, said, I've never seen this woman in my life before. So, and really, it's kind of dumb when you send a guy, and that we've seen that often, that a woman or a man, signs off an appraisal report and they send someone of a different sex to go do the appraisal. You're going to get found out on that. Present a complete and detailed work file, as I said. Meet with the state's attorney and talk to them. And they're only human. They're going to understand. Be prepared to defend your appraisal report. Oh, I got some tiny errors in there, but hey, that doesn't mean that the report is, misrepresented or something like that. If necessary, hire an expert witness to testify in your support. And be a bit careful of plea agreements. They might try and plea you out. And if you have a good defense and a good expert witness or a good, attorney who's telling you, be a bit careful of those. So on the whole, what can you do to mitigate risk? That's really what you want to know, right? First of all, keep detailed work files. Make sure that you can have access to your work files and they're detailed, and you can present it if necessary. Always respond professionally to a reconsideration of value, because I'll tell you, lawsuits and state investigations often start with that reconsideration of value. I'm not saying just, do whatever to your value, but make sure your response is professional. Avoid boilerplate responses. Always ask the why, answer the why. Provide clear intended use and intended user language. Remember the duty of care, right? Make sure that, you're not just appraising for everybody. Attend a fair housing class, as I said. I think that's very much. Appraise with a level head. Remove all emotion from the process. I know the last 2 years have been incredibly difficult. We've been, just swamped. And a lot of you guys are pretty tired. Some of you got sick. And many of you got sick. I shouldn't say some of you, many of you. I don't think I've talked to an appraiser that didn't actually get COVID. And I think it's a lot of stress. And I think many of our appraisers are feeling that stress. And now we're equally stressed because the interest rates have gone up and we're all worried. And it's 100 degrees in most places. But just try. Remove all emotion from the process. Always ensure that you have sufficient support for your opinion of value. In the end, it's about the value you give an opinion. That's what you get paid to do. Make sure there is support for it. And that is it. 45 minutes. I always do the second one a little quicker than the first one. Maybe I just get used to it. If you have any questions, please send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I appreciate everyone being on the webinar today. We appreciate everything that you do for us at TrueUnion. We really do. All of our appraisers, you guys do an absolutely fantastic job. So thank you again for attending, and we will talk again next quarter. Thank you.